My BPM journey is more like a treasure hunting journey. So I didn't really choose to get into process improvement or business process management that space.
Welcome to Process Pioneers, the show that takes a deep dive into the minds of decision makers, key influencers, and process experts who are pioneering the world of everything process. Welcome to the next episode of Process Pioneers. My name is Daniel Rayner. I'm the host of Process Pioneers. And in today's episode, I have the absolute privilege of sitting down with Huang. Now, Ivy has a lot of experience in the business process transformation space and very much focused in the financial services area, superannuation and banking. So lots of experience that I'm excited to glean from. So if you're listening to this episode, get your notepads and pens out. We're going to be learning a lot. But Ivy, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Daniel, for inviting me into this conversation, and it's absolutely my pleasure.
Now, I have a lot of people that know you, Ivy, in my own network that have mentioned, the great work that you do. So I think that, it's when you hear someone's name get continually sort of mentioned and brought up in conversation, there's something valuable about that person that, a lot to learn from them. So
thank you so much. Yeah, I learned a lot from your the other episode as well.
That's good. Yeah, we're about 120 episodes in, so there's a lot of experience there, a lot of knowledge, and from all different sort of backgrounds and sort of areas. But talk to us about, I guess, your background and how did you first get into the area of business process management? Was it something that you were formally trained in, or was it something that you kind of stumbled into in one of your sort of workplaces?
Well, it's a really good question. I think for me, I like to see things. My BPM journey is more like a treasure hunting journey. So I didn't really choose to get into process improvement or business process management that space. I started from as a super fund administrator. So I was doing the daily transaction or handling those inquiries. And then I was lucky enough to get an opportunity to being part of the Six Sigma Green Belt certification program. So I start my journey, I would say, from there. And then I start to learn some from the formal training to learn some tools, methodology to understand the process what I was doing. And then to find out, it's actually a better way to do that. And yeah, that's basically where I started. And then after I start a process improvement projects or initiatives, then I gradually realized that I'm more interested in the bigger picture of the process management. So later I moved to process architecture space. And then once again, I was lucky enough to learn from some really great industry professionals, and also work for some great leaders and get involved in some exciting adventure in some kind of new methodology or method has been tried in different initiatives. So yeah, this is where I'm coming from, and I guess I'm still learning.
That's great. No, that's good. I think we all are learning. I think the moment we get to a point where we don't think we can learn anymore, well, that's where we stop growing, So, but when you talk about process architecture, I think I just want to touch on that point for a moment, because I think when a lot of organizations, or maybe in particular senior leaders, think of process, they think very much of process mapping, documenting processes down in sort of boxes and flow charts and things like that. And for some of them, they see no value in it. That maybe they did an exercise like that a number of years back. It didn't deliver any value, so they're not going to do that thing moving forward. Why is process architecture so important? How does it fit into the overall sort of BPM landscape? And I guess what's the difference between maybe what these executives are seeing with process mapping and what process architecture actually is.
Yeah, process architecture is a framework. To me, it's a tool to facilitate process improvement. So basically, if you don't have an architecture to articulate what you do in your business, you're basically not really managing your business process in a most efficient way. Previously, we normally focus on process management from operations perspective. So how to manage the resource and how to reduce the cost and how to maximize our sales. So which are all good very important part of business process management. But I guess from executive perspective or leadership team perspective, I don't think mapping process maps means much for them, because in their level, what they need to know is in overall what they having in their space, what product, what technology, and what process, what customer, and how all these things working together to bring the value to customer and bring the value to shareholder. So that's what they normally will consider more. And the reason why process architecture didn't get much visibility or buy-in from a leadership perspective is probably because one thing is it's normally process improvement project normally start from scope, and process mapping will be focused on more of the fragment of the process instead of having the end-to-end view. And process architecture is the way to show end-to-end value chain or end-to-end delivery. So this hasn't been really, I guess it's case by case for each organization, it's not been widely adopted as a tool because of one of the major reasons is because of the complexity. And that's why what I'm trying to do during the year's learning and in any future initiative, if that's involving process architecture, I will try to make sure it's easier or simple enough to consume. So that's the most important thing. If you see something really complex on a picture, you probably don't want to dive into the small boxes on that picture. But if that's very straightforward when you first see it, you probably want to see what's done in each individual component in that picture or framework. So I guess that's might be one of the reasons.
Yeah, okay, great. And you mentioned there that, one of the drivers, I guess, for a senior leader would be is more on the operational side, managing their resources, reducing costs, things like that. Would you say that's would you say that is the main driver for an organization to adopt business process management as a methodology, as a management practice, or are there other drivers that you've seen organizations, that drive an organization?
The operations, the process improvement from operations, the staff from operations, that will be more from the efficiency perspective, which we just talked about. So it is traditionally a biggest driver for the cost efficiency. But I can see in the recent years, the regulator has been enforcing some of the focus in the compliance part. So regulatory compliance has been driving a lot of process improvement initiative, especially from process architecture perspective, because generally regulator will want to see the business managing their process end to end to ensure the business is safe and the customer is safe. So that's what I can see a really big driver at this point in time.
Yeah, okay. And obviously the, the driver is there. The drive is there because organizations do adopt BPM and they deliver significant value or realize significant value through business process management approach. What are some of the biggest challenges an organization may face when adopting BPM? Obviously, every organization has its own challenges, a different culture, different leadership, many different variables. What are the biggest challenges an organization will face?
From adopt BPM perspective, what I can see is the leadership buy-in is the biggest driver, because the BPM project or program, if that not getting top-down approach from the leadership team, it's generally will stop at just mapping a bunch of process and pulling shelf. That's normally what it gets end, and it could answer the question to the regulator at point in time, but it's not really bringing much value to the organization itself, and that's why it's like a circle. And the leadership didn't see they need to put this effort to tick the box, but they didn't see the value of doing this. So that's the biggest challenge. And also another challenge I would think is the technology part. So we have invented a lot of technology, like in how to make things easier for customer. So that's especially last 3 years during the COVID, we can see a lot of automation has been done. A lot of customer engagement has been putting online. So a lot of technology focus in this part. But with BPM, if you want to show the result easily, or you want to actually come up with an architecture, a way of linking all the components of the BPM together, a BPM solution become very important. I see it's critical, to be honest. And if that's too difficult to make, even for the mapping, if I'm not saying process architecture, but for mapping, a different mapping tool can create same map like in 5 minutes or in 1 hour. So that's how much the difference is.
Right. Okay. So you've seen a lot of automation initiatives in the organizations that you've been involved in. Is that? I know that for some organizations, they jump at the next shiny object. They jump at new technology because they feel like it's going to solve all their problems. That maybe they see a competitor adopt new technology, but without maybe fully realizing, understanding the differences or the foundations that are already in place. I guess before when embarking on that automation journey, what are the foundational elements that need to be in place to make sure that it is a success, or to make sure it's as successful as it possibly can be?
Yeah, well, I guess a lot of organization has learned from their own success and also the failures from the automation, because I can see over the last 6-7 years, when there was point in time automation is like can fix everything. So the organization jump into the automation for a lot of area, and then just replace the resource, human resource, with some of the technology, which for some part of the business that might see a benefit in a period of time. But I guess we all learned that if you doing the automation in isolation, not considering your process, in not considering the process length in a sequence, then you might have problem. You might fix the problem for downstream, but create problem for upstream, or the other way around. So I guess doesn't matter what technology we're using to automate the process. We can only automate those process that actually we should only automate the process that can give us best efficiency. So if that's no from overall perspective, that means we're not really fixing the problem from end-to-end delivery perspective. So I guess that's the learning we all have in this journey, that process foundation is very important. It doesn't mean process mapping, but a process lens. You need to connect the dots before you actually execute something, or even analyze which part to improve in your process. So this is another reason I like to see process management in a bigger picture. And also I see process architecture as the foundation instead of process mapping.
Yeah, okay, great. And ultimately, it's about helping leaders make better decisions. I mean, that's how I see it, is we're trying to equip those that are in management positions in the organizations that need to make decisions.
Yep.
How are they making those decisions based on what information? And you know, it's hard to make good decisions when you don't actually know what's going on and you don't know what your baseline is. So
yes.
For someone that's in an organization, because we have people listening to this podcast that they're currently working in an organization where there isn't a whole lot of buy-in. Maybe they've been brought in on a project level or in one particular part of the business, but it's obvious that it's just a process mapping thing. They don't have that sort of enterprise-wide process architecture, that end-to-end view of the organization. How do you get buy-in from senior leaders? How do you convince them that this is important, that the process architecture, this is going to help you with your decision-making? Let's not just do sort of isolated process mapping in a few sort of select areas of the business. Let's actually do this from an enterprise-wide approach. How do you go about getting that buy-in? How do you talk to these people that maybe don't necessarily understand all of the technical jargon that us as process specialists use on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. Well, first thing first, I would try not to use technical language. Sorry. So use the plain English. I think it's the best way to talk to someone who don't really have process background. And but with the senior leader, they generally have pretty good business understanding, and they have their vision, and the vision is the things they're really considering to make it happen. And that's the reason why they lead the organization as well. So I guess there are two things to do. One thing is if the initiative, BPA initiative, hasn't been really set up, but it's just like a consultation period, I would showcase some of the potential process architecture, and how they could become a tool to facilitate their needs. Doesn't matter if it's for process improvement from the lens of process efficiency, or from the compliance perspective, how they understand their compliance environment. So demonstration, I think it's very important. And what you demonstrate, and if you got time to prepare for a particular organization, that's even better. So you can see how simple it is can come up, and how deep you need to go with architecture. That's another story which you don't have to communicate in the in the consultation period. That's from the top-down approach. Firstly, you need to get them interested to know architecture, and you need to let them know it's not as complex as you think, and it's very practical and flexible. And that's the top down. If an initiative already set up, they have this. They already set up a set objective of the BPM project, and but the architecture process mapping is part of that. Process architecture might not be part of the scope. What I would do is I would actually start from what the plan was and then try to work on it and then work with business to start the approach. I mean, start from what they set up, and then you obviously need to adjust in middle. So test and learn. So you need to test it and then give your options to the business. That's another way of showcase, but this is more bottom up. I can show you if I have a structure, firstly, from an end-to-end level in your space. And then if you think that works better, I can tell you from organization level, we can also come up with this. And then this is something we can use. So for me, it's really like walk through it instead of talk through it. Talk to support the work, but the work is the foundation to show.
Yeah, okay. No, that's great. And I guess it really depends on, you were mentioning it a little earlier, what matters to them? What do they care about? Let's not use this technical language. Let's understand what keeps them awake at night, and what makes them hang back at the office for that extra hour or two because they've got things that are urgent sort of issues or important issues that are pressing on their sort of headspace. We got to understand what's important for them, yes. and then communicate or articulate the value that BPM can bring, but from their point of view, using their language as well. I think yes. That's really important.
Exactly.
Now, obviously, in the many BPM initiatives that you've been involved in, I'm assuming you've seen various degrees of success with the work that's being done, whether that's on a large scale or a small scale. Do you have a couple of examples or stories that you could share with us? Obviously, anonymizing any of the information that can't be shared. But do you have any examples or stories you can share about where BPM has been put into practice and it has delivered a certain result for the organization?
Let me think. So there are definitely some example I can share. Maybe not the detail of the example, but in general, like I said earlier, so compliance focus is driven by the regulator quite heavily, especially in the financial industry with the reason we all know. So with the compliance type of initiative, and what regulator is driving is you need to actually know what you're doing. So if you don't actually know what you're doing, you can't demonstrate to me you are managing your process, you are protecting your customer. So you are having the safe growth. So safe growth is very important. So I was involved in a few initiatives in relation to the compliance uplift. So we did start from going into the business teams to capture what they do. So that's that's the quickest way to get a bunch of lower level process, detailed process map. We normally call level 4 process up. So, and then the learning from there is, yes, it's very easy to send a bunch of process modeler into the business area and have the workshop capture a lot of processes. But what's the linkage between all these processes? When there was only like 10, 15, or even 20 processes, it's easier. It's easy to put it together, the linkage together later on, because that's not too complex. So, but when it becomes hundreds, and then you realize, oh gosh, I don't know where those hundreds processes start from and how they link to each other. And you realize, because you didn't do the scoping first for each small process, which is not feasible to do at that point in time, you realize your process linkage is not left to right. It's not only left to right. The processes, all the level 4 processes documented, link to each other like in multiple dimensions. So that become a puzzle to solve. So, and then I did spend I did spend about 3 months with 3 professional process modelers working with me to sort hundreds processes, 400 plus level 4 processes, into an order to a higher level, level 3 summary process, and then link to a process architecture, a value chain, end-to-end value chain I was working on. So at that time, I was working on the end-to-end value chain, and the process mapping team are doing the mapping. And then because we're doing it in parallel, so there's no point, there's no way for us to talk to each other upfront. And that's the hard lesson we learned. You do need to spend a lot of time. And even after we spend those time to actually link everything from the bottom-up approach from level 4s to the end-to-end value chain, it's still not perfect, or it's not a perfect fit, because sometimes I have to have to group a bunch of level 4 process to be sitting under one stage of the end-to-end value chain, which not neatly sitting because they are overlapping. So it's a lot of work later on, but it's hard to present to the leadership team saying, I do need to spend this effort at this point in time because we didn't do that previously. So after that, I always emphasize, if you need to do mapping, doesn't matter it's a small scope or a large scope, end-to-end with the end-to-end value chain, or only a stage of the value chain, start from the top level. So top-down approach for mapping is always what I suggest. And that will be most efficient. You can set the scope right for individual level 4 process in level 3, and then you can prioritize which level 4 to go to actually do the mapping. Some of the level 4s you might never actually go into the mapping because that might not be the problem area. So in this way, you don't really need to document every single process.
Yeah. No, that's good. Now, 400 processes, there'd be many organizations out there that would have hundreds, if not thousands of processes as well. Where do you begin? Where do you start? I mean, you have mentioned start from the top down, so start at that high level. But when you do start getting down to level 3, level 4, what should be the deciding factor around where you prioritize and spend your time? Because obviously the senior leaders, they're going to want to see some results, and they're going to want to see some results pretty quickly. So how do you make that decision around where to spend your time, effort, and energy in the early parts of the process?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And once again, this case by case as well. It depends on your objective of that initiative. If the focus of that initiative is compliance uplift, like you want to understand what's your current control environment in your organization or in a certain space, or what's the risk control and obligation in this process? What's the existing control? If that's if we having enough control in this process or not. So if that's the case, then the prioritization, basically you need to have a rating. You need to have a rating system based on your objective. If the objective is controls environment, you will need you will need to put a heavier rating on how to identify control, obligation, and risk. So if the project objective is to reduce the cost for a certain function, or how we deliver a certain product to customer end to end, then the rating would be what is the most expensive part of this process, and then we're targeting on that process. Or if that's customer experience focused, then you would need to targeting your rating on what's the biggest problem, what's the most complaint coming from. So that's really depends on project objective.
No, that's great. That's really good. Now, when we look to the future of BPM, obviously we touched on sort of the evolving landscape of technology, and I'm sure you've seen the BPM's landscape evolve and adapt over the years, and we would have seen the pressure being or the microscope been put on BPM over the last couple of years, I would say, with COVID and supply chain shifting and changing and people working from home. Like, that's a lot of processes that have changed very drastically. But what does the future of BPM look like? What trends are you noticing? Are you noticing a certain theme coming through the types of work that you're doing and the conversations that you're having? Where do you think we're going to be in 2, 3, 5 years' time?
That's a big question, Daniel. Yeah. So, the future of BPM, I guess, to me, I like to see two things. One is the technology evolving, and we can get some good solution that can support the BPM in a way, but not that expensive. So that's technology solution is very important. And I think that will help us success in this world. A lot of people working from home, and technology become a really big part of the job. So this is one thing. The second thing is the culture shift. So with this transition from like traditional way of working to now more remote way of working, so the culture will be different as well. So a lot of people are working from home. You not necessarily sit with your team or sit with one organization. So that's just the fact. We could potentially go back a little bit, but probably very hard for us to go back to office 5 days a week now. So I guess culture change is very important for BPM to demonstrate the value we can do for an organization to make the life not only easier for the customer, but also easier for the employee as well.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's really good. I think there's a lot of organizations that they still need to get those foundational elements in place. I think there are still companies out there that have no idea what their workforce are doing, what their employees are doing, or they might be just doing the same work they've always done for the last 5, 10, 15 years. And I think that that is there's a risk there. It exposes them to disruption. It exposes them to maybe more agile, sort of moving companies that are willing to continually adapt to the marketplace. I know that we see that. I talk to sort of local government. I think is a good example where they need to be aware of what the experience that customers are expecting. Because myself, as a consumer, as a member of my local council, I'm getting a certain experience from the different organizations I interact with my bank, with the different retail stores that I access. And a lot of things are online now. I mean, I think I ordered a couple of things this week, and it was just all in the comfort of my own home. I didn't go to any shopping center. It's all been delivered to my door, And I think if we're getting certain experiences with some organizations, and we're going to be naturally or subconsciously comparing our experiences to other places we interact with. And I mentioned local council because, oftentimes they are slower moving and slower to maybe innovate. That's obviously a huge generalization. I know there are some local government out there that's very innovative, but I think it's really important to understand the landscape's changing. If consumers are expecting, their expectations are changing, and we need to be aware of that. But last question I have for you, Ivy, is more around for those that are listening to this podcast, and obviously we've only been able to squeeze in so very little into the half-hour conversation we've had. But where would you advise our listeners to go if they want to learn more about this topic of BPM? And I guess a follow-on question from that is who have you learnt the most from in your journey in the BPM space? Is there some sort of a process guru out there that has taught a lot of what you now know?
Well, my best friend is Google and YouTube as well. So yeah, I do learn from a lot of things from by searching from those channels. And like I say, like your episodes, a lot of things I learned from the professionals through LinkedIn as well. And I guess firstly, you need to ask yourself, what's your purpose to know this? So you need to have your questions, because that's just for BPM. There is no a standard way to start or to execute or implement, and it's really case by case. Depends on a lot of criteria and the environment and people you work with as well. So for me, where I start is by asking myself the question, what problem I want to solve. So what problem you want to solve, and then you can start to find the answer, and then to the research will need to be done. And there is a lot of resource in BPM space. Personally, my preference was one of the professional in this world, which I see your engagement with Roger as well, Roger Chagia. So I really lean on Roger's 7 enablers in process management, because that's the really practical, and you can actually take his paper to actually start implement. And that makes a lot of sense. So I think finding something you can lean to and someone you can lean to. And I also get in touch with Roger sometime as well. So this is the way I learned. I still continue this way. So I guess my suggestion is, what problem you are solving?
That's amazing. That's fantastic. I think it's a great way to end the conversation. What problem are you solving? I think it needs to be at the forefront of our minds in everything that we're doing when it comes to BPM. You know, it's so crucial. But Ivy, I just want to thank you so much for sitting down with me and having this conversation today. I've certainly been gleaning a lot from this conversation, and I'm sure our audience and our listeners have been as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel. It's my pleasure.